invest in and follow principles. That has proved to be pretty successful.
This landlord's going to make almost $2 million over the next 12 years for doing something one time. And that's like residual. This guy's got another 7 retail spaces and he's got 10 stories of apartments above it. And I'm like, man, I'm on the wrong side of the coin, right? I need to own real estate, not broker it.
You start doing deals that are absolutely life-changing, like that put you on the path for intergenerational wealth.
Welcome to the Real Estate Home Runs podcast. I am your host, Louis Van der Horst. This is a podcast for busy professionals who want to learn about passive income producing strategies that have helped others crush it in the real estate world. Whether you are a new or seasoned real estate investor, this is the podcast for you. Welcome back to the Real Estate Home Runs podcast. We have Stewart Beal join us today all the way from Michigan. Stewart, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
I feel like you have a lot to offer to my audience, and just following you, connecting with you online and hearing about your stories, I feel like my audience is going to get a lot of value from this.
Yeah,
So
I appreciate it.
tell us how you got started with real estate, more about your background.
Yeah, okay, great. So I grew up in a pretty entrepreneurial family. My father was a contractor and my mother was an attorney. And I started reading business magazines and business books just naturally. I started reading really early and then started reading business books really early. My father subscribed to probably 10 business magazines at his work, and he would bring those home when they got a little old, like done at the office type of thing. And I would read them cover to cover. And I figure I read 100,000 business articles over the years, basically. And I would read it just cover to cover, every article. And that really engrossed me in business. And then I started working little odd jobs around construction sites that my dad had, as he was a contractor. And then when I was 13, I started a little lawn mowing business like a lot of teenagers do. You know, you mow your parents' lawn, you mow your neighbor's lawn. And then when I was 16, I got a vehicle and started expanding that business all over the neighborhood. And it ended up having 400 customers. And I took on a partner at one point, and then she actually, when I was 19, bought me out of the business for $250,000. And the deal that we struck was $50,000 down. Basically, I walked with the money that we had in the business at the time, and then $1,483 for 10 years every month. So it was $1,483 a month for 10 years. And the final thing is she agreed to mow any lawns of properties that I acquired. So that was the 3-part deal that we struck. And that provided me with some cash in addition to working construction that I was doing at the time. And the first deal I did was a traditional commercial real estate deal where I brought $50,000 to the table and borrowed $212,000 and bought a 5-unit at Eastern Michigan University for $262,000. And it was a glorified house hack. I call it a big house hack, basically, because just for people that don't know, a house hack is when you buy a 3 or 4 bedroom house, live in one of the bedrooms, rent out the other bedrooms. Well, this was like a bigger house hack. I bought a 5-unit, lived in one of the units and rented the other 4 units. But the math was pretty much the same, where basically the other tenants covered the mortgage, interest, insurance costs of the operation, and I was able to live at a low expense. And when you live at a low expense, you're able to save money more easily and continue on with real estate investments. So that's how I got started.
And just curious, back then was 5 units or more still considered commercial?
Yeah, I actually didn't know the difference between a residential loan and a commercial loan. What happened was I met a man who owned 10 multifamily properties, and he owned them all around Eastern Michigan University. And he said, I've got a duplex, I've got a triplex, I've got a 4-plex, I've got a 5-unit. And I said, well, all these properties are 100% occupied. That doesn't achieve my goal of being able to live in one of these properties. And so what we did is we bought the 5-unit because it had a vacant property. And the way it worked is I just started applying for loans, and then I got educated at that point. Oh, you actually can't get a residential loan. You have to get a commercial loan because it's a 5-unit. And that was fine. I just went out and did that.
Gotcha. And would you say then when you caught the real estate bug, it was like a gradual thing through the magazines that you were reading, or a particular conversation or an experience even?
Yeah, by reading business articles and reading the Forbes 400 and reading a lot of what was going on in the late 90s. This was in the late 90s. Real estate was quite obviously a great thing to do. And it was a way to build wealth. This was before the dot boom. And so the people that were on the Forbes 400 were all real estate investors, or a lot of them were. And so it was just obvious that real estate is certainly a good way to go about it.
Gotcha. And when it comes to like your transition into investing, like, yeah, that you're getting your feet wet with the house hacking. I know you do a lot now with the property management as a broker. And what was that next step from house hacking? What else did you do?
Yeah. So the next step was buying larger properties. And in my career, I've bought as large as a 468 unit apartment complex. I bought a 267 unit apartment complex. And then I bought single family homes, 5 units, 7 units, 10 units. In fact, next week I'm buying a 7 unit and a 5 unit on the same day. And so I've bought properties of all sizes. Basically what I do is I evaluate what deals are available in the marketplace that are attractive to me, and then get into the best deals no matter what size. And so the second deal I did was actually a 30 unit. And at that point, I didn't have all the capital to do that myself. So I took on an investor and we bought that 30 unit. So that was the next deal. But for years after that 30 unit, I never saw a 30 unit or anything above that again. And so I was always going after smaller deals. So, I bought a 5 unit, I bought a 30 unit, and then the next literally 50 deals were all 3, 4, 5 units, 6 units, 7 units. And those are the deals that I went after.
I think you mentioned something really valuable. And it's that, like, once you figure out the formula, you figure out what your criteria is, it doesn't matter how many units are there as long as those pieces fall in place and you bring in the partners to tackle something like that.
Yeah, we could talk a lot about what size deals a real estate investor should be doing. Clearly, the bigger the deal, the better, for a couple different reasons. For instance, it takes almost as much work to get a loan on a 5 unit as it does on a 50 unit. So really you should probably be doing bigger deals. But I've always taken kind of a dual approach. Try to do bigger deals, but also do as many small deals as you can that come your way, and especially if they're in your target market. And we do a lot of acquisitions around Eastern Michigan University. And so I'll even buy a single family home if the price is right.
And it seems like, from my experience talking to other investors, people have limiting beliefs. Perhaps one limiting belief is that, that unit is too large for me to take down. What would you say about that?
Yeah, so I would just give you an example of what I did. So when I went to buy my first property, I bought a 5 unit. And a lot of people said, that's too big a prop to go after as your first property. You should buy a single family home or a duplex. Then when I went to buy the 30 unit, a whole bunch of people said, well, that is way too big for you to buy as your second property. You should focus on something, a 6 unit or a 7 unit. And then when I bought my first 90 unit property, they said the same thing. And when I bought my first 154 unit property, they said the same thing. And then I actually, with partners in a real estate syndication, went out and bought a 468 unit apartment complex. And believe me, that was crazy. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But the largest property we had bought before that was like a 200 unit. So we went from a 200 unit to a 468 unit. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the 468 units, the best property, the best deal I've ever done. So I would say, as long as you have an excellent plan and are willing to work very hard and have reserves in place and to make sure that you're covered if things don't go perfectly, the size of the property, doesn't matter as much as some might think it is. Now, if you've got no experience in storage, don't go buy a huge storage complex. If you've got no experience in mobile homes, don't go buy a mobile homes. But, at the end of the day, apartments are apartments. So buying a 30 unit or 150 unit is really not that much difference in terms of what you need to do every day to manage it, So that's kind of what I have to say about that.
I have to say that's very impressive, hearing about your growth and the momentum that you were able to build to go from the 5 unit to then the 30 to the 200 and then the 400. It's really good. I really want to hear more about, maybe you could walk us through how you found the deal, to how you were able to tackle this 32,000 square feet property that you bought with none of your money. Walk us through that property.
Yeah, okay, great. So the foreclosure crisis hit in 2008. And at that time, I owned 7 or 8 properties. So basically, I bought my first property, that 5 unit, in 2002. I bought another 5 unit kind of development deal in 2004. And the same year, I bought the 30 unit. And then in 2005, 2006, 2007, 2008, I bought a property a year. But then when the foreclosure crisis hit, I realized it was a once in a lifetime opportunity to buy real estate. And so I just did everything I could to buy as many properties as possible. And so that led to, some really crazy endeavors. I bought about 3, 4, and 5 unit properties around Eastern Michigan University. The average purchase price was $30,000 or $40,000 foreclosures. So we were buying at less than $10,000 a unit. And those properties are worth $75,000 or $80,000 a unit now. And then the real wild things that started happening is that people got so desperate, they started actually begging me to buy their properties. And when that's happening, really beautiful things happen. So first of all, what I would do is I would drive around and I would see for sale signs that look weathered and look like they're a little tipped over and they've been there a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
And what I would do is I would write the owner of that property a letter saying, hey, I see you've had this property for sale for a long time. I see you've been unable to sell it. I'll buy it at the price that you want if you lend me 100% of the money to buy it from you. And so what I did is I did a series of 0% down land contracts. So I bought an 8-unit apartment building for 0 down. I bought a 7-unit for 0 down. I bought a 4-unit for 0 down. And once that got you in the mind, wow, you can really buy properties for $0 down. What's the next step? And the next step was trying to buy larger properties using that same scenario. So I actually met my best deal ever was the property in Detroit that you're talking about, or maybe my second best deal ever. But basically, the way we got into that is we met a guy who was struggling to fund his debt, and he was struggling on multiple buildings that he had. And so what happened is he asked us to manage the property, and he asked us to try to figure out a situation, what's going on. And what happened is I quickly realized that we weren't going to be able to save these properties from foreclosure. There was no hope for him into this setup to save the properties. And so what we did is I said, look, there's no way for me to save these properties for you, but is it okay if I approach the bank and take over this property for you? And he said, that's fine. And so I
new
approached
property
the bank.
manager.
Yeah, as a new property manager and the new owner. So what I did is I approached the bank and I said, look, this guy owes you $1.9 million on this building. The building's worth less than that. So if you foreclose on him, you're going to take a haircut on this. Would it be okay if I took over the loan for him? And
on a quick
that
claim?
means, yeah, kind of like that. Yep.
Okay.
So basically I put $0 down, but I'll pay you your loan and I take over the building. And he agreed to it. The bank agreed to it. So we purchased an 8-story, 32,000 square foot office building in downtown Detroit for the $1.9 million in debt. So we put 0 down, but we signed up for $1.9 million in debt. But we paid that debt down over 10 years, down to $1.5 million, and ended up selling the building for $5.2 million. And so the spread between 1.5 and 5.2 over 10 years is quite lucrative when you put 0 down. And there's a lot of daily battles there I could tell you about managing this building. I mean, it wasn't all fun, but at the end of the day, it was worth it. And that's a way we were able to buy buildings for $0 down.
What would you accredit to your confidence when you approach messy situations with a seller or tenants? What has helped you have the best outlook walking into situations like that and be able to look at different units, doesn't matter how many sizes, with confidence?
Yeah, so basically you gain experience and you keep a positive outlook and you just approach things with positivity, and you realize that you're going to make some mistakes, but you try to limit the downside and while also keeping things in reserve so things go well.
It's good. And I'm sure you're building your team throughout those years and now having 8 players to help you with those different transactions.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And we have a team now of 63 employees that work for us at Beal Properties, both in property management and then in maintenance and leasing and accounting. And then on the acquisition side, I'm starting to ramp up my team so that I actually have people that can underwrite deals on our behalf and can actually make offers on our behalf and then actually get loans on our behalf and then take the deal all the way to closing. I'll still be the personal guarantor on the property. I'll still provide the equity, but like they'll do 99% of it to get it to closing using parameters that we set up in advance. And so we're just starting to do that now.
That's good. Yeah. And now you can free up your time to oversee what's happening, the operations and systems, and look for other deals.
That's exactly right.
So for someone perhaps starting out, what advice would you share with them as maybe the first person that they should consider hiring, or how to add value to someone that is miles ahead of where they are, but they see the value in multifamily and want to get their feet wet?
Yeah. When people ask me they want to get started in multifamily real estate, I ask them what their experience is and I ask them what they're good at. And a lot of times it isn't much. A lot of times they have only one of the 10 things that you need to get a deal done and manage a deal. And so I help them kind of understand that, okay, if you don't have this, if you don't have that, these are the things that you need to put together in order to build a team. So when I wanted to start doing real estate syndications, I had 10 years of property management and acquisition experience, but that's only part of what a real estate syndication is. The major part I was missing was raising money and doing investor relations and doing serious accounting. So I'm good at property level accounting, but I wasn't good at fund level accounting or wasn't good at big picture accounting. And also, I had experience getting loans, but I didn't have experience getting Freddie Mac loans or bigger loans that you would need to run a successful real estate syndication. So what I did is I intentionally sought out partners to work with me, and we put together a 5-person team to go out and do real estate syndications. And so I had 10 years of experience in real estate, but I realized that I didn't have it all. And so I joined a team and put together a team so that things would go well. And so everybody on the team had a little bit of a piece. So Tom, my partner, he was very good at investor relations. He worked for Goldman Sachs in New York for 10 years. He had experience raising serious money, doing serious big deals at Goldman Sachs. Mike, he is a CPA, CFO, and he was good at the fund level accounting. Alon and John, they were good at getting the loans and doing some of the other investor relations, very good at writing investor communications and letters. And so we were a good team. But you can even break that down. Like if you're going to go buy a single family house, who's going to find the house? Who's going to inspect the house? Who's going to get the insurance on the house? Who's going to get the loan on the house? Who's going to be the property manager? Who's going to be the leasing agent? Who's going to renovate it when it needs to be renovated? I mean, you've got to put together a team if you don't have all of those pieces together.
That's good. Yeah, because it's definitely a team sport, and something that I enjoy reading from one of your recent Facebook posts is how real estate is relationship based. If a seller wants to sell you one of their buildings, they're going to want to make sure that you're going to take care of it. You're going to be a good steward of that property.
Right.
And that same principle applies to a team.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So what is next for you? What's your short-term goal or maybe long-term goal? Where do you see things going?
Yeah. So in 2020, COVID hit, and my partners and I, we were doing these real estate syndications. We had a pause on what we were doing because of COVID, and we didn't know what was going to happen. And out of that pause made me realize that I think I've gained enough knowledge about all aspects of real estate syndications that I can do the next one by myself without partners. And so I formed Beal Capital, and you can check it out at bealcapital.com. And I set out to raise $2.5 million, which we're just wrapped doing now. And then in 2022, we're going to raise $10 million and invest in $30 to $35 million worth of real estate. And the first fund, we targeted apartment complexes mid-size. So I bought a 24 unit, a 20 unit, a 60 unit, a 25 unit. And then in the fund 2, we're going to go after apartment complexes that are larger, targeting apartment complexes that have on-site offices and amenities, pools, fitness centers of 100 units or above. And so I'm looking at bidding at a 110 unit about 40 minutes from my house next week. That would be part of that fund. And so that's my plan for the next couple of years, is to continue to do real estate syndications. We also offer some investments for smaller investors where we invite them to become true partners in deals that we do, 3-unit, 4-unit, 5-unit, 6-unit deals around Ypsilanti. So if any of your listeners are a non-accredited investor, that means they have a net worth of less than $1 million, but they still want to get involved in real estate. They can still reach out to me, find me on LinkedIn, find me on Facebook, send me a message, and we can invite them to invest in a 5-unit property with us. And the way we do that is, let's say the 5-unit property costs $400,000 and it's a $300,000 loan and it requires equity investment of $100,000. If they invest $50,000, they would own 50% of the deal. But we would still manage Beal Properties, would still manage it. We'd be the property manager. And so it'd be a pretty passive investment for the real estate investor, but they could still see it all happening and benefit 50% of all the benefits of owning real estate, 50% of the cash flow, 50% of the appreciation, 50% of the depreciation, and how that all works.
Yeah. And they have some boots on the ground that can handle anything that comes up.
That's exactly right.
Now, do you guys only invest in Michigan, or have you invested out of state?
Yeah, so I have investments in other sponsors, real estate syndications in other states. So now I'm fortunate enough to be able to have equity that I can invest in other people's real estate syndications as well. So I realized, as someone who lives in Michigan, I don't know Atlanta, Georgia very well, but that seems like a very attractive place to invest. So instead of me flying down there and trying to buy properties myself and then managing them from a 12-hour drive away, I've invested in a trusted partners real estate syndication who has an office in Atlanta. So we bought some apartment complexes that way through that real estate syndication in Georgia, North and South Carolina, and Alabama. And then in terms of the properties that we operate and that we invest in just a 1-hour radius around Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti area, so that we can get to the properties quickly and manage them.
Just so that I have an idea, region-wise, where would that be in Michigan? Northeast, Northwest?
Yeah,
or
that's in Southeast Michigan near Detroit. So we manage properties in 40 cities around Detroit.
Okay. What would you say maybe 3 principles that have helped you hit real estate, singles, doubles, triples, or home runs in personal life or in business?
Yeah, okay, great. So the first thing is I keep it positive all the time. So in real estate, you'll deal with like the most negative situations ever, especially if you're dealing with property management. You might buy a property on a Friday and then Saturday morning, the hot water tank blows out and the tenants don't have any hot water. And sometimes the way they treat you is not very nice, even though you just bought the property yesterday. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They come at you pretty hot, a lot of F words in there and all that type of stuff. And you're like, hey, I just bought the property. Man, the hot water tank went out. That's bad. And let me get some quotes on Monday and get a new hot water tank in there. And 2 days without hot water? Say, yeah, I mean, the contractors are closed. I don't know exactly what I need to do. I'm going to have to figure it out. So just try to keep it positive and educate people on what to expect. And that's something that's not your fault. And then on the flip side, There will be things that actually are your fault, where you made a mistake or you screwed up, and so people will be upset about that. And it's business. If you try to do 100 things a day like I do, you're not going to do all of them perfectly. You're going to make a few mistakes. And so, if people get upset, you keep it positive and try to rectify the situation as soon as possible. So that's the number one thing I do. And then the second thing is just be constantly networking, constantly helping people out. So like if you tomorrow found a property where you lived and you wanted to email it to me and say, what do you think about this? I would spend some time advising you, because then the next day you're going to meet a guy who has excess capital and doesn't know how to invest it. And you're going to say, hey, I just talked to Stewart on a podcast. He helped me with my property. He might be able to help you with your situation. And then all of a sudden, him and I are doing business, And so I always just are constantly networking. And I'll tell you a really good example of that is we try to buy properties off market, right? We don't want to buy listed properties if we can avoid it. And so, exactly. And so I hired a man to replace the kitchen cabinets in a frat house I bought. His name was Steve with Curtis Kitchen and Bath of Ann Arbor, Michigan. And then I was hosting a real estate event, and I asked some subcontractors to help sponsor the event because the event cost about $10,000 to put on. So I said, Steve, could you be a sponsor and could you come to the event and tell people about your wonderful cabinets? And he said, sure. So we developed a little relationship that way. And he called me a few weeks later and said, Stewart, oh my God, I've got the hottest deal ever. I can't believe this is happening. But I was just replacing kitchen cabinets for a man named Milo. He owns a 24 unit next to the Detroit Metro Airport. And he told me when I was replacing these cabinets that he wants to sell this property. I'm the cabinet guy. I don't have a ton of equity to do this deal myself. Would you like to buy this property? And I said, give me Milo's phone number. And I called Milo. I said, Milo, I want to meet you over there right now. Milo agreed to meet me over there. He was already in the area. And we just sat in this garage on the property and we just talked for an hour. And then we started negotiating. And by the time 2 hours up, I had agreed to buy the 24 unit apartment complex for a price that worked for the both of us. And that just came from networking with this guy, Steve, the cabinet maker, and that's why I'm just constantly networking and doing favors for people. And I just think that if you put positivity out there, it'll come back to you in various ways. And as long as you're out there hustling and ready to take up opportunities, you can make things happen. So those are two things. I don't have a third.
But those are really good because as you're staying positive, you're not letting that bug you down and you're still being selfless by helping as many people as you can, which in turn helps you with your needs.
Right.
So that's good. Yeah. How can people stay in contact with you, learn what you're up to?
Yeah, so I'm Stewart Beal with Beal Properties and Beal Capital. You can friend me on Facebook. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. And then our property management website is gobeal.com. That's GOBEAL.com. And then our real estate syndication investment website is bealcapital.com. And you can connect with us there as well. If you go to bealcapital.com, you can create an account and then see our investment opportunities for both accredited and non-accredited investors. And just follow us. You'll see I post multiple times a day about real estate on both LinkedIn and Facebook. So if you want to get a feel for what we're doing, you can follow me there.
You don't beat around the bush.
Yeah, that would be a waste of time.
Yeah, but I have followed up with some of the things you post and it's good quality content. And it's always good to get insight, see, okay, how did someone find that deal? How did they fund it? What's working, what's not working? That's really good.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much for joining. I really enjoy meeting you. Is there anything that I maybe should have asked you that I missed?
No, I think you pretty well covered it. I'll leave you with how to find off-market properties.
Yeah.
That'll be the final bit of wisdom that I drop here. So basically, one of the main things people ask me is, Stewart, how do you do so many off-market deals? Almost all of my deals are off-market. And so I run a 5-point strategy to find off-market deals. And the first way is I write letters. Now, you might read a real estate book and they talk about dropping postcards in the mail and that type of thing. I make them a little more targeted. I drive around neighborhoods and I count the mailboxes on properties and I say, oh, that's a 7 unit. And I write down that address. And I say, oh, that's a 6 unit. I write down that address. And I go back and I look up the owner of the property in the city's database and I'll send them a targeted letter that describes their property so that they know I'm not just some person who doesn't even know what they own and bought some list somewhere. And then I tell them a little bit about myself and I tell them they can search me on my website and that type of thing.
Can you explain what you mean by describe the property a little bit? Just that piqued my interest.
Yeah. So I just say, hey, I was driving on North Normal Street. I own a property on North Normal Street. I saw your property over at 113 Normal Street. Beautiful property. I really like the stonework underneath those historic windows. And I was looking up on the database that it was built in 1893. That's really, really interesting. And oh, by the way, I'm interested in making additional real estate investments in the area. So no pressure, but if you're ever interested in selling, I'd be interested in talking to you about it. And I've actually had people call me within 3 days of sending that letter. Wow. And I've also had people call me. I've actually had people call me 7 years later after sending that letter.
Wow.
And that guy was like, hey, my father passed away. And I was like going through this stuff and I see this letter here. And well, the reason I'm going through this stuff is because we got to sell this property and you want to buy this property. And by that time, I wasn't interested in that particular property. But that's just an example of if you put out all this interest in the world, it'll come back. That's the first thing I do. And then the second thing is just constantly networking. So I before COVID, would attend all the business networking events in the community, be a member of the Chamber of Commerce, go to the award dinners for business people, go to the meetups, and just constantly networking. And the third thing I do is we buy properties with real estate brokers that give us the deal off market. So I'm a licensed real estate broker, but I'm not out here trying to take people's fees all the time. What I do is I tell them, look, you can keep your fee. Bring me the deal before you put it on the overall market, and I'll make sure you keep 100% of your fee, and I'll close quick. And then the fourth way we do it is we are really good at being hired to manage people's properties and then buy them when it's their time to sell. So as an example, in May 2020, I bought a 37 unit in Dundee, Michigan that we already managed. And then in June 2021, I bought a 60 unit in Monroe that we already managed. And basically what happens is the first person they ask is the manager. Hey, manager, I'm thinking about selling this place. Can you give me some advice? And then you say, oh, I want to buy it. And you just start that conversation right away. And then the fifth way we buy real estate is we do compete for listed deals, but we do it in a way where we have an advantage. So sometimes the advantage is paying cash. Sometimes the advantage is financing, getting approved for financing beforehand. Sometimes it's the 468 unit. I produced a 37 slide PowerPoint presentation that I gave the seller to tell them that we were the best buyer. There were 14 bidders on that property, but I was able to convince the seller that we were the best buyer by putting together this PowerPoint presentation. And so, yeah, those are the 5 ways we buy properties.
That's a big competitive advantage.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'm just soaking it all in.
Yeah, so that's the way to do it. And none of those things that I just said are out of reach for anyone.
Yeah.
I've been doing this for 19 years now, so I do have certain advantages in speed and size and ability to close that some people might not, but those same strategies will work. They just might work slightly less well for someone just starting out, but do still try them, do still go for it. And someone starting out only needs 1 or 2 deals to feel like they're doing a lot and getting going. And I promise you, if you run those 5 strategies, you'll be into 1 or 2 deals in no time.
That's good. And you're able to get it off market before it's exposed to other buyers, so you can negotiate the terms with the seller and the broker if they're involved. That's great.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Hey, thanks so much for all these
All
golden
right.
nuggets.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me, and I enjoyed the time talking to you.
We hope you enjoyed this interview and got some value out of it to help you in your real estate investing journey. If you can take just a minute, please do us a favor and leave a review. Hit the like button on iTunes or whatever platform you listen to our podcast on, and subscribe so you can hear future episodes. Also, don't forget to check out our Real Estate Home Runs Podcast Community Facebook group, where you are able to connect with some great listeners. If you're an investor who is crushing it and want to share some information centered around passive income in real estate, please contact us. Hit those home runs, and we will see you next time.